there, welcome back to another week of shows. This week I've got a couple of different things lined up. I'm going to start with Napoleon, the epic Napoleon from Abel Gance, which was released in 1927. And it's obviously silent, just before the sound era. It is almost 6 hours long. You know, there's a lot to this film, and you can find it in a BFI Blu-ray release, which has all of it restored as much as it can be restored for now, and you've got commentaries and little documentary things about the restoration. It's a wonderful package. I'd highly recommend it. That's how I saw it. But when it was released in the BFI, they also did cinema releases as well. So some people were lucky enough to see it in the cinema. I saw it in a projection. I used my projector for it so I could see it on a screen, so it wasn't just on the TV. That really helped a lot, but I'd love to have seen it in the cinema. It is 6 hours, so it does take a while. You know, it's an epic film. It's a really epic film, and you're going to have to get used to the pace of it. But it's quite easy. I mean, there's only one section in it I think is a bit slow. And that's something you have to have in it, but I think it could have been cut down a little bit, which is the romance between Napoleon and Josephine. But even that's set up a little bit. Even that's because Napoleon is not very good at romance, the characters, so at least they manage to have some humour there. But it's the one bit that slows the film down because you're going from one bit to the next really quickly, and then suddenly it stops, like dead, for this romance to happen. The way it happens in a lot of adventure or movies or films about war, they go on and on, and suddenly it's like, oh, we have to have the human element. It's like, why? We don't need the human element. Plus, the actress playing Josephine, she was a famous actor in France at the time, but she's not very good in this. I have no idea what Napoleon saw in her based on the performance in this film. It is a kind of very mediocre performance. There's nothing to it, really. There's just nothing there. I mean, she's older than Napoleon, as is historical fact, but the character's meant to be one of the great beauties of the Paris during that era, and it's one of the three great beauties of that era. And then you see her, and it's like, she's physically she's fine, but nothing spectacular. I mean, she doesn't have the personality either that would actually push through that, because some people, their personality is what gives them the allure. Here, she just seems dull. She's not particularly amazing looking, and she's meant to be one of the great beauties of the time, and it's like, nah. I mean, Napoleon's ugly, but she's not that great either. It's like, it's weird. It's a weird relationship, and it's just one. It is the kind of performance that kind of slows the film down, but doesn't sink it though, because the rest of it's so good that it makes up for it. But that's the one weak point in the film. Now, the film itself is viewed as almost an apology for Napoleon. I mean, it's viewed as like too pro-Napoleon for its own good, because it ends in a very kind of patriotic thing of, you see the French flag in three different parts of the screen, like red, white, and blue. For most of the film, it's black and white, but you get little bits of colour here or there, and you get colours within the colours are printed on, so you get for nighttime you get the blues, and you get all the different colours to suggest nighttime, switch between interiors and exteriors, and try to suggest lighting states, but because it's a very crude era in filmmaking, it is a very kind of simplistic colour scheme, but it works for the film, because the film is a melodrama, and it just works. It really works, because the director knows what he's doing. It's a well-lit film, despite that, and the colour schemes really deliver, because sometimes actually having very primary colour schemes actually helps the film. Sometimes you don't need to have tons of nuance in the lighting scheme of different colours. Sometimes just one is actually good, especially when you've got a character who's such a maniac as Napoleon, because it seems to suit his character, which is a kind of very much a black and white kind of figure. He's not really into nuance at all. He's a maniac. So I think trying to make it actually feel like it's a colour scheme that's developed would probably get in the way of the film. But this film actually takes place the first section of Napoleon's life. It takes him from a boy to invading Italy. That's all it does. I mean, after that, so you go through the revolution stuff, but I mean, basically it was 6 hours, and it's all about how Napoleon was affected by the revolution and the post-revolution and the mania around about it, and how he kind of rose to power. And the interesting thing is, even though it's meant to be like viewed as something that's so pro Napoleon and so like pro France, Napoleon's a maniac in this film. Napoleon is. There's no way to get around the fact that the guy was a lunatic. I mean, he was patriotic to a fault, but he was a loony. He loved France. He saw France in a way that no one else saw France, and he was on a romantic view of France that was probably sociopathic. It's definitely suggests it was in this film, but it's a weird thing of there's a mix of romanticism and sociopathic behaviour that's quite a lot of crossover. And this film kind of, even though it's saying, oh yeah, we're pro the past and we're looking at this as something that rose France to a higher level, but kind of aware this guy was a loony. And there is this kind of weird, interesting tension throughout the film of the lunacy mixed with romanticism, mixed with it's jumping between like the patriotic fervour of Napoleon with pulling back and realising this guy is a lunatic. This guy really is a complete loony. And that's what makes the film entertaining. Is you've got this weird tension that I don't think it's underrated by a lot of people who write about the film. I think a lot of people just say it's pro Napoleon. It's like not. It's really not. Because coming from a distance, Napoleon looks like a lunatic for most of this film. He's viewed as a believer of France, though. I mean, he's viewed as really patriotic. I mean, he starts out the film as this small, skinny kid in this boarding school. He's a Corsican, so the Corsicans are viewed as scum in France. So he actually doesn't come from the mainland of France. He comes from an island of France that people look down on, and it's very kind of linked to England. So people who are there are just basically called animals. So it means he's got a lot more to fight, and it actually makes his fervour a lot more dynamic. There's just something there in his makeup that he thinks he knows what he's doing all the time. He's always very tactical, which makes up the fact that he's not the most physically imposing person. So he has to work from limitations. So he learns that at school very early on, where he has to fight bullies. And there's a snowball fight at the beginning of the film where you see Napoleon, his army, his people are outnumbered because he's got the lower amount of people, and he has to defend a spot and take the flag from the other side from a snowball fight, and he wins. And there's a lot of blood involved and brutality because he will not bow down, and he really makes the other boys look bad because he really plans it out and is very careful, and the other boys try and cheat and he still gets beyond it. So you see his character formed then. It's a wonderful sequence. The whole Napoleon's a Child sequence is wonderful because it sets up the character for both good and bad of the character, which is he is very tactical, but he is very determined, but probably a bit too much. It's been almost like grown into it at this point that he has to keep fighting everyone else because they will not notice his qualities if he doesn't. So by the time you get to an French Napoleon era where he's an army guy, he's very poor, he has to have cardboard shoes and things, and he's watching the revolution happen, and he's very much pro-revolution, pro to the idea of giving people some more quality at that point in his life, but he also views human beings as animals, and he doesn't like them very much, and it shows you a distance. Like, he's got an idealism towards his country, but he doesn't like the people in his country very much. Which probably is a kind of case of a lot of people who become leaders. Is like, I can bring this country up if only I could deal with these bloody people. So there's that element to him, which is wonderfully shown. And then you see him going back home to Corsica, doing the first section where Corsica's trying to go to the English side of the English-French, because England and France are always at war with each other. They hate each other. It's a typical thing. I mean, the whole area of France called Brittany. I wonder where that came from, eh? So he's very torn about what's going on there, because a lot of people in Corsica actually think they're better off with the English because the French hate them. And he's the one person who will not do that. And he will cause a rebellion within in Corsica, and he's wanted by the Corsicans, and he's basically getting hunted down. Eventually escapes in a boat and goes back to France, but he's like he's a lunatic there. He's just like jumping into their headquarters and yelling at them and running away, and all hell breaks loose. It's a brilliant sequence. It just shows the mania of this guy, how much of a lunatic he is. He doesn't just go away. It's like, instead of saying, okay, we're going to lose here for now, we better go back to France and then try and deal with this later. No, he just causes havoc and barely escapes his life, and it shows you that kind of mania that overtakes Napoleon. It's just crazy. But the experiences there kind of do teach him how to be forward and be direct and keep going, which helps him a lot when he goes to his next assignment with the army, where they're trying to fight off the English and take a fort, and he becomes artillery officer because no one has. Basically, the people who were originally in charge of the forward front, because this is taking place just after the revolution, so England think that France is weak, so they're pushing forward, and they're trying to retake the fort. France are trying to retake the fort, and the people they've got in charge are useless. They don't see any need for artillery. And Napoleon's been brought in to take charge of artillery. His commanding officer gets fired, and a new guy comes in, and the new guy sees Napoleon's actually very good at what he does, and Napoleon actually starts to turn it around. And during what, because this is about an hour sequence in the middle of the film, from hour 2 to 3, and you see Napoleon actually turn everything around and end up disobeying orders and attacking the English during a thunderstorm. He gets me to do the attack, and then he just says, keep going. It looks bad now, but we'll defeat them. And he ends up winning, and they destroy the English and take back the fort, and Napoleon becomes a big hero. But you see during this point, he's a maniac. Yeah, he helps them, inspire them, but he does not care about the lives that are lost. He sees lives as just numbers. He does not see them as anything major. He sees most people as just scum, basically. If someone rises up, he'll remember them. If someone's actually a good soldier and who's worthwhile for him, he'll remember them. But most people he doesn't care about. He is a lunatic. He has an ideal. So this is a film that's kind of a warning about idealism going mad. If you've got a maniac who does this, and you've got a power structure that's really weak, someone like this can rise up pretty quick. Because you actually see that post revolution, where they're actually arresting all the old rich and beheading them, and anybody who was even vaguely rich is getting accused of being treason to people. So you've got the Satan Justs, and some of the original revolutions are actually beheading the old compatriots, and eventually the revolution turns on them because they're such bloodthirsty maniacs. And Napoleon's caught up in this because they don't like him very much, and he will not do what he's told, and he will not take assignments to actually try and quell the rebellions against the people who are rising up against the revolutionary heroes. So he gets arrested and put in jail. Not the first time. When that falls apart, and that's a great sequence. It's funny because, I mean, one of the interesting sequences is actually Napoleon's not in it. But it's a really fascinating, you can do much more of it. And you're seeing all this stuff about people in the office actually eating some of the accusation papers to avoid anything happening to certain arrested people. You know, it's insane. And you've got all this, I mean, this could be a film in itself, this whole post-revolution thing. And it's wonderful. And then eventually Napoleon gets a free, but he still refuses to actually do anything that actually goes against his own people. Like he says, send me against others, send me against foreigners, but not against one people. Which shows you how little he thinks of people who's not French. And you've seen the other one, how little he thinks of the French people. He just didn't like the idea of actually being the person doing it to them. He doesn't care about the people. I mean, that's pretty obvious early on. And eventually he becomes, when the armies of the rich are coming back to try and take control, he's brought in to quell them, because he's a tactical guy from this earlier fort, and he quells them down, so he becomes a great leader, and he starts to marry his way to the top, which is marrying Josephine, and he says he'll marry her if he's allowed to invade Italy. It's how romantic. So the whole film is just his rise to power through this weakness at the centre of post-revolution France. It's just fascinating how this complete lunatic actually rises because everyone around him is utterly useless. That's how he rises. I mean, everyone makes so many horrible mistakes that his mania looks good in comparison because he's most single-minded. At least he knows what he wants, and he can inspire the people because he knows what he wants. Everyone else is just flailing around. But the cost of listening to Napoleon actually is lots and lots of death because he is insane. And what the film's really good at is actually showing his interior state by lots of really inventive ways where many of the film ratchets up very slowly. In the first section, you actually learn from his childhood, and you're seeing his emotions, and it's a lot of quick cutting, which when you see the projector really makes a lot of emotional sense. And the film slowly ratchets up the speed of the pace of the film as he gets more experience and he becomes more of a maniac. And all the battle scenes are stunning. The battle scenes are really stunning because it shows you the actual insanity of the battle with all these dead people. Is the dark humour of the battle sometimes, and the main that overtakes Napoleon at the battle, and how he's kind of so focused. So he's the one person who's focused within the absolute insanity of a battle. He knows what he wants. I'm going here, here, here. And the style actually is so impressionistic. It's not trying to show you the realistic world. It's showing you how it feels to the people involved. And that's the kind of pleasure of it, and that's the kind of importance of the film. It's not, you're meant to bring your interpretation of what these people are to it. It's not going to do it for you. It is an impression of what they feel. That's all the director's going to do. It just relies on you to bring your own stuff to it, really. And yeah, I mean, basically, some of the things is, he may actually see Napoleon differently from how I'm seeing it now. He may have seen Napoleon as a great hero, but for me, I just look at Napoleon as a lunatic. But the style of the film is so good. It keeps you going for like 6 hours, silent, very little dialogue, and it jumps between different time periods and different setups, like childhood, Corsica, the revolution, post-revolution, the siege, going to Italy and having these 3 bars of to make an extra long widescreen thing, like 30 years before widescreen, because they shot like 3 cameras shooting as far as they could to suggest widescreen, even though it's not perfect. But it completes the idea of this mania going from something small to something large, and you can see the whole world in front of him at this point. He's risen so high. So it's a good expression of who he is. But it doesn't stop to tell you who he is. It's like you're meant to be impressed by it. He's starting to develop stalkers, and people are so impressed by him just by what he does, but they're not being very critical of him. They're saying, maybe that's not a good idea, and it's just this idea of the mania of the time that really, and the mania of people involved and his story and how they're emotionally affected and why they make decisions. And it's not a thing of a Freudian thing of intellectually they did this decision because of this and this and this. No, it's an emotional decision. It's what's pushing them forward, and the needs can push forward. It always comes across, and that's why the Josephine thing's such a problem. Is you feel that he doesn't have a clue who she is, Abel Gance at all, and he's like, I have to deal with her. I don't know why he married her, but there's a great sequence when Napoleon actually forgets his own wedding. He's so busy planning an invasion of Italy from France that he forgets his own wedding. That's a really good. The great send up of the whole romance thing is he forgets his wedding because he's married her just to invade Italy. Most films would not have that in it, but it is actually a wonderful film. It's really funny. It's really enjoyable because Napoleon is unintentionally funny, and he is so in his own head that and I think the director sees some of the humour in Napoleon, even though he's kind of on Napoleon's side sometimes, but he also knows the mania, and he's also showing you the mania. So I think he's trying to show you the good points and the bad points of the character, but I'm not sure how much what he really felt with Napoleon, but I know how I feel when watching it. And it is a really terrific film. It's really well made. It's so impressive technically, but also emotionally just watching the film. You're not thinking of technical achievements, you're just looking at it and thinking, this is interesting, that is interesting. Gance actually cast himself as Satan Just, one of the biggest villains of the film, and he's really good in the film. And the acting's all really good apart from Josephine. Everyone else they don't overact, they don't underact, they do the exact right pitch for this silent era. So it is just wonderfully done. You could do lots and lots about Napoleon, but this is my introduction to Napoleon. I think basically, I'm pretty sure I'll talk about it again. You know, I know a few people who really enjoy this film, so I'll see if I can get them on board for something at some point. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with another one. Right, bye for now.